Prioritize me over the funeral. The day of my mother's funeral coincided with the day of the trip. Naturally, I couldn't go on the trip because of the funeral. I thought so. But my mother-in-law and husband thought differently. They wanted me to go back to my parents' house for the wake and come back early in the morning on the day of the funeral to drive them to the airport. Right. This is exactly how these two are. This is the epitome of selfishness. But right after hearing the news of my mother's death, I didn't have the energy to argue with them. Fine. I'll come back early on the day of the trip. Thank you. That helps a lot. I thought it would be easier not to think, so I reluctantly agreed. Early on the morning of the funeral, I headed back home. We're cutting it close on time. Hurry up, hurry up. They had already loaded the luggage into my husband's car and were all set to go. Once in the car, I took the wheel. What?
No! Oh my God!
As we went through a slightly larger intersection in the neighborhood, a car came speeding toward us. I got into an accident just 5 minutes after starting to drive. I lost consciousness and woke up in the hospital. Apparently, I missed my mother's funeral. As I sat on the bed, staring blankly out the window, the door to my hospital room suddenly opened. Standing there was an unexpected person. Hearing the truth about the incident from that person, I made a firm decision on the spot. I'm Mary. I'm 27 years old and have been married for 6 months. My husband, John, is 5 years older, and we met through a mutual acquaintance. He's known for being kind and serious, making me feel like he's too good for me. After getting married, we started living very close to his parents' house. This choice was made respecting my husband's opinion. This area will be within commuting distance for both you and me. This area includes my parents' house. It would mean a slightly longer commute for you, but I'd like to be near them. Is that okay? I don't mind, but is it because of your parents? Yes, but specifically my dad. My husband looked awkward and averted his gaze from me, focusing on the property information. I had a feeling I understood his concerns. I knew his mother was a bit eccentric. The first time I met her was when I visited their house to introduce myself before our wedding. It was quite an impressionable experience.
Welcome. Come on in, come on in.
Thank you so much. When we arrived at the house, his father greeted us at the door. He expertly brought out guest slippers and led us to the living room where my mother-in-law was.
Oh, welcome. Please sit down. You, go get the tea quickly.
My mother-in-law was lounging on the living room sofa. Following her instructions, my father-in-law quickly went to the kitchen. It's not that I intend to say anything outdated about gender roles. However, my mother-in-law's behavior made me feel uneasy. As my husband and I sat on the sofa, my father-in-law served us tea. I wondered what my father-in-law thought of this situation, and it must have shown on my face. Even without saying anything, my mother-in-law answered my unspoken question. Don't mind him. Today, Mary, who is going to be John's wife, has come to greet us. This is a moment where Mary and I, as the women of the family, are the main characters. So he should be attending us, you know. My father-in-law had a wry smile on his face. When I looked at John's face, he had a look of resignation, as if he was saying, "Here we go again." After the greeting, I talked to my husband, and he said this was typical behavior for his mother. There were many times I was surprised by her actions after that. This beef stew is the best. Here, you have some more to drink. Hey, chef. Bring in more meat, please. For the meeting of our parents, my husband had reserved a formal restaurant. But my mother-in-law insisted that a casual place would be better for an informal chat, so she reserved her favorite restaurant. The only one having fun was her. Both my parents, husband, father-in-law, and I were all holding back. Even the chef seemed confused. My mother-in-law continued to go wild. At our wedding, she apparently went around saying that I would become a housewife without my knowledge. Where did she get that idea? I planned to continue working after getting married and had no intention of becoming a housewife. So when my boss asked me, "When are you planning to resign?" I panicked, wondering, how did that happen? There were many other episodes where my mother-in-law bewildered those around her, all within the short period from the greeting to the wedding. Observing her behavior, I realized something. She would present her own theories and firmly believe they were right, then act on them. Even when others pointed out otherwise, she would push forward, convinced of her correctness. If obstructed, she would get angry. In simple terms, she was self-centered. Her behavior often puzzled those around her, and she was known as an eccentric in the neighborhood. My husband had lived with his parents, so after getting married and moving out, it would be just his parents at home. He was worried about leaving his father alone with his mother. However, his parents were still only 60 years old. Despite everything, his parents had stayed married for a long time. I think John felt, it's not necessary to live together and keep a close watch, but it would be reassuring to be nearby and keep an eye on things. I also thought, surely leaving his parents alone wouldn't cause any major problems. However, it seems we were both too naive. 6 months after we got married, his parents divorced. Moreover, it was an after-the-fact report. Panicking, we rushed to talk to both of them. What happened in just these 6 months? She doesn't do any housework, spends our money without permission, and yells when she's unhappy. Just the other day, she bought an expensive designer's brand bag without asking. When I asked her, "What are you gonna do with that?" a glass cup came flying at me. I just couldn't take it anymore. Hasn't she always been like that? She has, but it's gotten especially bad recently. I just couldn't stand it any longer. What kind of household had glass cups flying around daily? And if it got worse, what on earth was she doing? The conversation between my husband and my father-in-law continued naturally, leaving me out of it. It seemed this was not a discussion I could interrupt. I decided to focus on understanding the situation as best as I could. According to their conversation, my husband's departure from the house after our marriage had escalated my mother-in-law's selfish behavior. With accumulated dissatisfaction, my father-in-law finally asked for a divorce. We then went to talk to my mother-in-law.
He doesn't understand how hard housework is. That's why I made him do it.
I heard you spent a lot of money without permission?
Don't you think housewives need a salary too? I'm doing the housework for him. So I used the money he earned as my salary. It's just that simple, and he kept complaining, so I got angry. If he has a problem with how I spend the money, he should just earn more.
The treatment of housewives is often a topic of debate. But in her case, should she even be part of that discussion? According to John and my father-in-law, he helped a lot with the housework. When he was at work, she took care of the house. But when he got home or on weekends, she would say, "All right, your turn," and leave everything to him. This wasn't a recent development but had been the case since John was a child. Yet, she attacked him again with her theories. There's no fixing this. Hearing her words, John sighed in resignation. Having seen their relationship up close, John did not oppose their divorce. After the divorce, my father-in-law moved out of the house. The fact that I could somewhat imagine why was terrifying. After my in-laws' divorce, my father-in-law contacted John for a while. However, the contact gradually decreased, and now John can't reach him at all. So we don't know where he is or what he's doing. He probably wanna calm down alone. It seems best to leave him alone for now. With his gone, my mother-in-law was left alone in their house. Then, John made a surprising suggestion. I know it's a bit of a waste since we've only been here for a little over 6 months, but could you consider moving in with my mom? What? Why so suddenly? My mom is still only 60, but I think we'll need to take care of her in the future. If we have kids or our jobs get busier, it'll be tough. If we're gonna live together eventually, it's better to do it sooner. Living together. Don't worry about her going wild. I'll handle it. I crossed my arms and frowned, imagining a future living with my mother-in-law. Her selfish behavior had escalated because John moved out of the house. He said he would keep her in check. Besides, my sister and her husband live with their parents for similar reasons. And they live peacefully with my parents without any trouble. All right. But if anything happens, make sure you take my side. I understand. I'll make sure nothing happens, so don't worry. John is kind and serious. Since he said this with a serious face, I thought he must be right. There was a time when I believed that. Mother, you took money from my wallet again, didn't you? I've asked you to stop. Could you at least ask me first? This house is mine. So anything in it is also mine. And you don't need to act so high and mighty over just $20 or $30. Nowadays, it's hard to earn $20 or $30, and it disappears quickly when you buy something. Be quiet. Don't you understand your position as the daughter-in-law and me as the mother-in-law? Daughters-in-law must not defy their mothers-in-law. I don't know about other houses, but that's the rule here. So stop complaining. Even before finishing the conversation, she imposed her conclusion on me and left the living room. Once we started living together, I was left with all the housework, my money was taken without permission, and my complaints were ignored, just like my father-in-law had experienced. Moreover, her selfish behavior kept escalating. After a while, the money disappearing from my wallet became $100 or $200. But I had made a promise with John before we moved in together for situations like this. Could you talk to your mom? She doesn't listen to me. Again? I just talked to her the other day. She calms down for a moment but quickly reverts back. Could you be a bit more firm with her? Oh no. It's such a hassle. She's only taking about $100 or $200 a month, right? Just consider it pocket money. If it goes over $500, let me know. Is this about the amount? Isn't the problem that she's taking money? It's about the amount. Like my mother-in-law, John often leaves the conversation halfway. He never protects me at all. Though he does tell his mother to stop, he isn't serious about it. This issue with money was settled with a simple "don't take Mary's money." He seems to find my consultations annoying lately, so he comes home later. And he goes out alone on weekends. Being left alone with my mother-in-law is hell. Her selfish behavior keeps escalating, and John's empty words are slowly wearing down my spirit. And the bad things keep coming. What is this? What's going on? Oh my, this is terrible. Is this scratch from a coin? Or maybe a nail? One morning, I was stunned to see my car. There was a straight scratch from the front passenger door to the rear door. My mother-in-law seemed delighted with my misfortune. I couldn't help but glare at her. What? It wasn't me. Isn't it rude to accuse me without proof? Sure, it's rude to suspect someone without evidence. But this situation is obviously strange. We have two cars, a small one and a sedan. The scratched one was the small car, which is mine. The sedan, which is John's, is mostly used by my mother-in-law for shopping and errands. It's practically her car. You can understand why I would be suspicious since the car she uses exclusively was untouched. Despite thinking it was a hassle, I had to talk to John about it. My car was vandalized. Don't you think that's strange? There's no proof that my mom did it. Just listen to me. That's too troublesome, so I'll pass. Once again, he left in the middle of our conversation. Where had the kind and serious husband I knew before our marriage gone? One day, I encountered the kind and serious husband from the past. Hey, John. Long time no see. Really? We just ran into each other at the supermarket the other day, didn't we? Sometimes, when I'm about to go grocery shopping, he suddenly says, "I'll come with you today." Today was one of those days. While we were heading to the supermarket, we ran into one of his acquaintances. Apparently, he was a childhood friend of my husband. I heard you just got married and are already living with your mom. And it's because your parents got divorced, right? You decided to live with your mom so quickly, you're really something. No, it's just the right thing to do. But more than that, my wife deserves the credit for allowing it. She never complains about living together and takes good care of her. John gently pushed me forward to introduce me to the man. Caught off guard by the sudden introduction, I just smiled and bowed. I think I understand now. He is known for being kind and serious. But it seems that's just a facade. It looks like he only cares about his own reputation. Thinking about it, his actions start to make sense. He occasionally comes to the supermarket with me to look like a good husband in front of the neighbors. Living with his mother was probably also a way to boost his reputation. Now that he had achieved this, he did nothing at home and just talked. Being kind to me and his mother at home doesn't affect his reputation much. After returning from shopping, I decided to test if my thoughts were correct. You were in such a good mood after being praised by your friend. I almost said, at home, he's all talk and a completely different person outside. Hey, don't say that. It would ruin my image. I don't mind. It's the truth. No matter what you say, people already think highly of me. If I joke about it, no one will take it seriously. But since we're married, my good reputation also benefits you. So this means we need to work together to maintain a good impression. Don't say anything unnecessary that could hurt your own reputation. So, you're saying you're living with your mom just to boost your image? And as long as people think we're living together, it doesn't matter how you treat me or your mom. Any issues between you and my mom, you should solve yourselves. Why do you keep trying to involve me? It's annoying, so stop it. Besides, your burden has lessened now that Dad's gone. You should be grateful that I didn't oppose their divorce. After saying everything I wanted to hear, John walked away from me. My suspicions were mostly confirmed. It seems he only cares about his own reputation. I also understood why he didn't stop his parents' divorce. I had been fooled by his good facade just like everyone else. John was also the type to justify himself with his own argamjon. The difference was that my mother-in-law wanted everything to go her way, while John only cared about his reputation and didn't mind about anything else. I stared at the shopping bags on the table, thinking, I don't think I can stay here. However, one should never give up from the beginning. It's important to try to get along. I decided to look for ways to get along with John and mother-in-law. Mother, can you help me make dinner? Why should I have to do that? Failure. About your mother. I already told you I'm not interested in that. By the way, are you ready for our trip the day after tomorrow? Failure. No matter what I did, it was like trying to nail jelly to the wall. I could feel the thought of divorce becoming more defined in my mind. The trip he mentioned was a gift he gave his mother for her 60th birthday. The three of us were supposed to go on a hot spring trip the day after tomorrow. We should have gone much earlier, but with his parents' divorce and our move, it got postponed until now. A hot spring trip for his mom, what a filial son. But now that I knew his true nature, I couldn't help but see it as a show for others. Honestly, I didn't want to go on a trip with the two of them. That night, my wish was granted in an unexpected way. It's terrible. My sister just called. Mom was in an accident. Calm down, calm down. How bad is it? The wake is tomorrow, and the funeral is the day after. What? They were stunned into silence by the sudden news. Their expressions darkened. Despite everything that had happened, it seemed that even in this situation, they wouldn't show an unexpected reaction. They seemed genuinely saddened by the news about my mother. But this was a huge misunderstanding on my part. I'll head to my parents' house first thing tomorrow morning. What about the trip? What? Canceling the trip is not an option at this point, right? Since it's your mom, Mary, you should go alone. We'll go on the trip. I was so shocked by their words that I felt like my soul had left my body and flown into space. Given the situation, I thought we'd cancel the trip. John and I would go to my parents' house. Maybe even my mother-in-law would come with us. But they were planning to go on the trip as scheduled. And they continued with their unbelievable requests. Oh, right. If you're not going on the trip, can you drive us to the airport? That would be convenient. It would save us parking fees if you bring the car back. I told you I'm going to my parents' house first thing in the morning. The funeral is the day after tomorrow, so I won't be home on the day of the trip.
Just come back for a bit. It's only about an hour's drive each way to your parents' house, right? We're leaving early in the morning, so you should still make it back in time for the funeral. Are you seriously saying I should prioritize the trip over the funeral? Yes, you should prioritize me over the funeral.
This had to be a joke. I wanted to believe they were being kind and trying to distract me from my grief. But their eyes showed they were serious. I didn't have the energy to argue with them right after hearing about my mother's death. Fine. I'll come back early on the day of the trip. Make sure you're ready to leave on time. Thank you. That helps a lot. Thinking it would be easier not to think, I reluctantly agreed to their request. The next morning, I headed to my parents' house. My car had been vandalized again and had a flat tire, making it unusable. Therefore, I took the train to my parents' house. When I returned to my parents' house, I faced my mother. Seeing my mother's face, I couldn't stop the tears from flowing. Seeing me cry, my sister and her husband, and my dad, who seemed to have run out of tears, started crying too. Early on the morning of the funeral, while everyone was still asleep, I took the first train back home. When I returned to my parents' house, I can just say I went for a walk to clear my head. I didn't want to bring up them and stir things up at home. We're cutting it close on time. Hurry, hurry. When I got home, John and mother-in-law greeted me with smiles. At that moment, their smiles irritated me. They had already loaded the luggage into my husband's car and were all set to go. Once in the car, I took the wheel. I wanted to get back to my parents' house as quickly as possible. Suppressing my urgency, I started the engine. We slowly drove out of our driveway and through the residential streets. Safety first, no matter the situation.
What? No! Oh my God!
As we went through a slightly larger intersection in the neighborhood, a car came speeding toward us. It hit the right rear side where my mother-in-law was sitting. The accident happened just 5 minutes after I started driving. Time seemed to slow down from the moment I saw the car to the moment it hit us. It probably wasn't even a second, but I felt like I thought about many things during that time. I was driving slowly, so I shouldn't be at fault. I didn't see the car in the mirror before entering the intersection. It must have been going very fast. My mother-in-law was sitting on the left side of the back seat. Is she okay? Will I make it to my mother's funeral? As these thoughts ran through my mind, I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. John, with a cast on his left arm, was sitting beside me. You're awake. I'll get the doctor. After the doctor checked my condition, John explained what happened. I had been unconscious for a day. I missed my mother's funeral. According to him, only my sister came to check on me after the funeral. However, because there were things to take care of, she quickly returned home after entrusting my care to my husband. She said that once things settled down, the family would come to visit me right away. In the accident, John broke his left arm and 2 ribs. I broke my right leg. We were seriously injured, but our lives were not in danger. The problem was my mother-in-law. It seems Mom injured her spine. There's a high possibility she won't be able to move her lower body. I see. She was sitting in the right rear seat where the car crashed. This was already shocking enough, but there was more to come. And about the other car, it turns out it was my dad driving. What do you mean? It was Dad's car that crashed into ours. And he seemed to be fine. He abandoned the car and ran away. So what happened to your father? They haven't found him yet. The police are looking for him. Why did this have to happen? My mother's funeral, the accident, my father-in-law's escape. It was all too much at once, and I felt like my head was gonna explode. I decided to stop thinking and sleep to escape the stress in front of me. The next day, I was sitting on my bed, staring blankly out the window, when the door to my hospital room suddenly opened. What? I thought my husband from the other room had come, but it was an unexpected person standing there. When I heard the truth about the incident from this person, I made a firm decision on the spot. The person who entered my room slowly approached me. I'm really sorry for what happened. It was my father-in-law. My father-in-law came to my bedside, apologized, and then dropped to his knees.
Father, why are you here? Why did you do this?
Panicking, I asked him the questions that immediately came to mind. He stood up and told me everything without hiding anything. My target was only Sandra. So, your target was just Mother. But why did you do it? When we got divorced, she took most of our assets as usual. I just couldn't forgive her for that. And then I started to think that Sandra's attitude got worse because you and John got married and John moved out. So I began directing my misplaced anger at you too, Mary. Do you mean you've already done something to me out of anger? Could it be? Yes. I was the one who scratched and punctured your car. I now realize how stupid that was. I had hated the person who vandalized my car. My mother-in-law seemed happy whenever something bad happened to me, and my husband was indifferent. The police only confirmed the situation and said, it's hard to catch the culprit. It was all a mess. But now, the culprit was standing right in front of me. My father-in-law, the culprit, looked dark and overwhelmed with regret. Seeing him like that, my resentment disappeared. My misplaced anger at you, Mary, was satisfied by scratching your car. But my anger at Sandra couldn't be settled so easily. What did you do? I called John. He was also troubled by Sandra's behavior, so I thought he would side with me. You were in contact with him? He said he couldn't reach you. It was more convenient for us to pretend we weren't in contact. John told me all about Sandra's current habits. When I heard she was using John's car, you decided to ram into her with the car. Yes. I intended to take Sandra with me. But at the moment I crashed the car, I realized Sandra wasn't in the driver's seat. I swerved at the last second, but it was too late, and I hit the back seat area. It must have been a major miscalculation for him that she wasn't in the driver's seat. But by swerving, ironically, he ended up causing the most harm to her, as he had intended. After the accident, I somehow only had a scratch. Seeing you and the others unable to move in the car made me realize the horror of what I had done. Then I suddenly got scared and ran away. What are you gonna do now? Should I call the police? No, I'll go myself. I came here because I thought I might not get a chance to apologize to you after I'm caught. He continued to talk about the accident and about John and Sandra in detail. After he finished, he bowed deeply and left the room. An hour later, John came into my room. Your sister said your family will come by this afternoon. I see. They must be worried. I need to apologize for everything too. I hadn't told him about his father's visit. So, John, unaware of everything, talked about the future. Watching him pretend to be remorseful filled me with disgust. I made sure not to show that disgust on my face. If they're coming, I hope they come soon. I just wished for time to pass as quickly as possible. After talking with him for several minutes, the door to my hospital room suddenly opened. Are you John? Could you return to your room? We need to ask you a few questions. What? What's going on? Why are the police here? Your father came here.
What?
Your father came. No further explanation was needed for my husband. My father-in-law told me everything about the accident, every detail and motive. John collaborated in his father's revenge. That was because it was convenient for my husband if Sandra was out of the picture. Listen calmly. John is having an affair. He plans to eventually divorce you, Mary, and be with his mistress. Is that true? He has been coming home late from work and going out alone on weekends. I thought that was to avoid my complaints. Apparently, his mistress didn't want to deal with taking care of Sandra in the future. I see now. If he lies about the reasons for our divorce, he can make me the villain. But Mother won't be easy to deal with. That's why he didn't want to leave her alone and move out. He cares way too much about his reputation. Exactly. When I discussed revenge with John, I was desperate. I intended to take Sandra with me, and even if I survived, I had already given up on my life. I promised John that I would tell the police it was personal resentment. Under that condition, he told me all about Sandra's current habits. After discussing it, John suggested the idea of crashing the car. This was beyond selfish. My husband was willing to sacrifice his own mother's life for his goals. And he planned to use his father to do it. Under different circumstances, my life could have been in danger too. A chill ran down my spine again. But John's plan failed because my father-in-law's planned attack coincided with the day I was supposed to drive them for the trip. The accident snapped my father-in-law back to reality, and he decided to face the consequences. His confession to the police revealed him as the perpetrator and my husband as the planner. That's why the police were here to arrest John. My father-in-law said at the end, "I'm going to the police to tell them everything. They'll probably come to arrest John, so please don't mention that I was here. If he finds out, he might run away." John walked out of the room with the police. But he paused at the door and looked back at me. "Make sure you atone for your crimes." From my words and calm expression, he seemed to realize that I knew everything. Urged by the police, he started moving again. After that, my father-in-law was arrested and given a prison sentence. My husband, John, was also arrested and sentenced. Both of them ended up in prison. John's sentence is longer than my father-in-law's. Apparently, the planner of a crime receives a harsher sentence than the executor. There was also some leniency for my father-in-law due to his remorse. However, until the very end, he kept shouting that he was not at fault and that it was all his father's doing. My hospital stay lasted about a week. Of course, I divorced my husband. Since my ex-husband wouldn't inform his mother about the divorce, I went to tell her myself. My ex-mother-in-law, unable to move her lower body, was still living in a hospital bed. "Mother, John and I are getting divorced. So I came to say goodbye."
What do you mean, goodbye? Once you become family, you're family forever, right? John is going to prison, isn't he? You're the only one I can rely on now, Mary. You'll take care of me, won't you? Because we're family, right?
No, we're no longer family. So, I won't be taking care of you. Even in this situation, she tried to impose her views on me. This would be the last time I had to listen to her irrational and unreasonable arguments. She would be cared for in the hospital for a while. With compensation and insurance money, she should be able to manage after leaving the hospital. I don't think it's like she absolutely needs me. And in about 10 years, my ex-husband will be out of prison. After that, she can have him take care of her. That is, if she can live with the man who tried to kill her. After I was discharged from the hospital, the first thing I did was visit my mother's grave to apologize for missing her funeral. I also promised to live a happy life from now on, although I didn't know exactly how. For now, I think immersing myself in work wouldn't be a bad idea. Finding a new hobby might also be good. Having the goal of finding my own happiness made me feel a bit better. After one more prayer, I left my mother's grave.
Right now, my dad is in critical condition. Can you come right away? I'll give you the hospital's address.
What? No way, I've just arrived at my vacation spot.
Huh? Vacation? What are you talking about? My father is in a serious situation.
When I got angry like that, my husband said something unbelievable. I mean, I'm not really involved with him, you know.
What? I'm exhausted from work every day. Let me have this trip.
I felt my feelings for him cooling down rapidly.
Fine. Don't bother coming back then.
My name is Julie, a 30-year-old housewife. I've been married to Ken for 3 years. We met at a social gathering. Being of the same age and sharing similar interests, we were drawn to each other and began to meet just the two of us. After several dates, he confessed and we started dating. He was bright and refreshing, always making me laugh. I was increasingly attracted to him. Our relationship went smoothly from there. About 2 years into our relationship, he proposed to me.
My feelings for you will never change. I want to build a warm home with you. Will you marry me?
Yes.
I'd be honored.
I immediately accepted his proposal. And so, we decided to get married. We then visited each other's parents to announce our marriage. My in-laws were very kind, and I felt relieved there wouldn't be any mistreatment. After a successful meeting between our families, we got married. Then our married life began. I quit my job to become a full-time housewife, as Ken had wanted. I worked hard at household chores, supporting him in every way. I made sure my cooking, laundry, and cleaning were top-notch. I paid special attention to our meals, ensuring a variety of dishes and different menus daily. It seemed like he was satisfied with my efforts.
Your cooking is so good, it makes me want to come home early every day. I'm glad to hear that. I'll keep making delicious food.
Thank you. Seeing him happy while eating made me feel joyous. I believed we would continue to live happily together. But things started to change after our daughter Mina was born. Being a new mom, I struggled with many unknowns in parenting. Sometimes, I couldn't manage household chores as I wished. Mina often woke up at night, making it hard for me to get up early and prepare Ken's lunch.
Sorry, can you buy lunch today? Mina kept me up until 4 a.m.
What?
No lunch? I don't want to eat out. Then you should have stayed up and made lunch. What? You're just relaxing during the day, right? Sleep when I'm at work.
Frustrated, Ken snatched $50 from me and left for work. I was stunned by his words. I didn't expect such a reaction. I was doing my best with parenting and household chores alone. I accepted doing household chores since I'm a housewife. But I wanted his help with parenting. There's no rule saying I should be the only one to bathe her, change diapers, or soothe her at night. However, Ken seemed to think his job was done by working, and parenting was solely my role. He couldn't accept any slack in household chores because of our child.
Is this another lazy meal? What? Lazy?
It's obvious.
What do you mean? There's a main dish, 2 side dishes, and a soup.
The main dish is weak.
You used to make more substantial meals. Are you slacking off? I've told you, I'm swamped with childcare and can't spend as much time on household chores. That's just an excuse. My mom always managed, even with me and my brother. She had it harder than you with just 1 child. You're just being lazy.
But I never thought he could be so insensitive. He seemed so kind and gentlemanly before marriage, but turned out to be a completely different person after having a child. As a full-time housewife with a child, and not working, I had no choice but to rely on my husband Ken's salary. I felt it was unfair, but I couldn't stand up to him, fearing that being abandoned would be the end for me. In the end, I couldn't argue back and just accepted what he said. It really infuriated me when Ken seemed pleased with himself for having the upper hand. I wanted to go back to my parents' house to relieve stress, but it was quite a distance from our home, making it hard to visit easily. This added to my frustration. If I could meet and talk with my mom during the day, it would help me let off some steam and feel more at ease. However, the distance meant I often had to endure alone. Despite this, I managed to balance childcare and household chores. Time passed, and my daughter Mina turned 3. At this age, she began to speak a lot more, and conversing with her became a way for me to take a break. Now that she started going to kindergarten, I had some time to myself, which allowed me to do housework and relax more. However, my relationship with Ken was growing colder by the year. He seemed not to want to be with me anymore and started coming home later and later. Usually, he returned around midnight, sometimes just catching the last train. He rarely ate dinner at home and barely interacted with Mina. He would come home when she was asleep and leave for work before she woke up, so they hardly saw each other. At one point, Mina even thought of Ken as just some man who was around on weekends. I felt it was bad that her own father was seen this way by his daughter.
Ken, can't you come home earlier? Mina doesn't even recognize you as her father. She asked me where her dad was and what he was doing. She tells her kindergarten teachers she doesn't have a father, and they even asked if we were divorced.
Ken seemed a bit shocked by this, but unwilling to change.
I'm working late, then going out with my boss and juniors for drinks. It's all linked to my earnings, which supports our family. So, you should handle these things. That's your role as a wife and mother.
In the end, he just dumped everything on me. It sounded plausible, but essentially, he didn't want to do anything. I doubted whether he was really working overtime or just out drinking. While I nodded along to his words, inside, I doubted him. It was foolish of me to have hoped for his understanding. He didn't share my sense of crisis at all. Underestimating a child can lead to a harsh backlash someday. And while Ken claimed he was working hard, our financial situation hadn't improved. If he was truly working overtime, it meant he was spending the extra money on himself, which was pointless and only beneficial to him. Ken began going out alone more often on weekends, even telling me to pack for sudden business trips. He seemed to see me more as a housekeeper. It seems like the only reason for continuing our marriage is because I take care of everything around the house. I didn't want to live just to take care of him. This rebellious feeling grew within me. But as long as we depended on Ken's salary, I couldn't just leave with Mina. So, I told Ken I wanted to work part-time during the day. Earning my own money, even a little, was important. As expected, he wasn't happy.
Huh? That's unnecessary. You just need to take care of the house as a full-time housewife. I want to save for when Mina wants to take classes or for school expenses. Of course, I'll still do the housework. Besides, you're hardly home for dinner these days. Me working during the day won't affect anything.
After some thought, Ken agreed.
Just make sure you do the laundry and cleaning. That's the condition. I promise I'll manage everything properly,
I assured him. This way, I convinced Ken and started working. Perhaps it was the way I phrased it. Not blaming him, but suggesting it wouldn't disrupt our current lifestyle. Ken must have realized that whether I worked during the day or not didn't matter. I immediately started looking for a job and found an office position with short hours. I was hired, much to my surprise. Working part-time and interacting with people of various ages and perspectives was a significant change for me. It widened my horizons and kept me in a better mental state. Earning my own money gave me confidence and strength. I worked hard and soon earned recognition at work.
Julie, you catch on so quickly. You're a great help. I wish you could become a full-time employee.
Yeah, Julie, aren't you interested in becoming a full-time staff member?
Well,
honestly, I was very interested. But becoming a full-time employee would make it difficult to balance childcare and household chores. First off, Ken probably wouldn't approve. When I shared this with my superiors, they looked disappointed but understood. However, I made it clear that I wasn't uninterested, so maybe there'll be another chance in the future. So I decided to keep working hard and wait for the right time. Meanwhile, something concerning Ken started bothering me. I suspected he was having an affair. One day, during my lunch break at work, I went to eat at a casual Italian restaurant downtown. That's when I saw Ken leaving the restaurant with a woman I didn't know. Ken was in a suit, and the woman looked more like she was dressed for work than for leisure, so maybe they were just colleagues having lunch. This alone wasn't enough to conclude he was having an affair. But, call it a woman's intuition, I felt there was a high chance Ken was cheating with that woman. So, I decided to hire a detective agency to investigate. Maybe Ken's late nights were because he was meeting with his mistress, not staying late with his boss as he claimed. He didn't look as tired as he should have been, probably because he was enjoying his time with his mistress. While making these assumptions, I waited for the investigation results. About 2 weeks later, the results came in. Ken was indeed having an affair. And the woman was the one I had seen. I felt a strange sense of relief that my suspicions were correct. Probably because this meant I could end things with Ken. If he was cheating, he would be at a significant disadvantage in a divorce. I could claim alimony and child support. And with a job offer for a full-time position, I felt confident I could manage even if we divorced. I decided to leave Ken. But then, I got a call from my mom.
Hello, Mom, what's up?
Julie, I'm sorry to call you out of the blue. Your dad collapsed and has been taken to the hospital.
What?
I hurriedly took Mina with me to the hospital. I hadn't visited my parents in several months and hadn't seen them since then. Hearing about my dad's sudden collapse was a shock. When I arrived at the hospital, I found my mom looking anxious.
Mom! Julie! Thank you for coming. How's Dad?
He's undergoing treatment now. We were relaxing at home, and he collapsed when I returned from the bathroom.
I see.
I patted my mother's back. She must have been shocked to witness her partner collapsing. The thought of losing my father was distressing. Just thinking about that made me feel really hurt. After a while, the doctor came out and informed us that my dad had suffered a stroke. He regained consciousness, but his condition was still precarious. Dad was admitted to the hospital. We went to his room and waited by his side as he slept. A few hours later, he slowly woke up.
Dad! Hey!
I'm sorry for worrying you.
I'm just glad you woke up.
The doctor came and checked my dad's condition. He was stable for now, but there was no telling if his condition might worsen. Mina had fallen asleep, so I left her with my mom and went back to our house to get some of Dad's clothes. During this time, I sent Ken a message, informing him that my dad was seriously ill and in the hospital. Ken didn't read my message immediately, but I figured I had done my part in informing him and hurried back to my parents' house. Later, we returned to the hospital, where my mom, Mina, and I stayed with my dad through the night, hoping for his recovery. He seemed to be breathing steadily, and I thought he might get better. However, his condition worsened by midday. He was rushed to the treatment room, hooked up to numerous tubes, and treatment began. I couldn't shake the feeling that he might not make it. I tried to contact Ken again. Given that my father was in critical condition, I really wanted Ken, as his son-in-law, to be there. But I couldn't get through to him. It was Saturday, so he should have been off work. Maybe he had been out drinking till late and was now asleep. Just as I thought I couldn't rely on him, the call connected.
Hello?
What's up?
Ken, can you come to the hospital right away?
What? The hospital? What do you mean?
My dad's in critical condition. Can you come immediately? I'll give you the address.
I was about to tell him the address when he interrupted. What? No way, I've already arrived at my travel destination.
Travel? What are you talking about?
Oh, didn't I tell you? Some colleagues and I planned a 2-day trip, and today's the day. I'm already here, so I can't go to the hospital.
What are you saying? My father is in a serious situation.
When I got angry, Ken said something outrageous. I mean, I'm not really involved, you know.
What?
I'm exhausted from work every day. I deserve a break on my day off. Let me have this trip. He shouted. I felt my feelings for him cooling down rapidly. I don't care about you anymore. Don't bother coming back. I hung up and returned to my mom and daughter, where we watched over my father. Unfortunately, despite the treatment, He never regained consciousness and passed away. We were engulfed in grief. I wondered how much we cried. My mom must have been terribly shocked. She and my dad were very close. We were in a daze, unable to think about anything for a while. But we couldn't cry forever. We gathered ourselves and began making arrangements for my dad's funeral. The wake was held the next day, and the funeral the day after. Many relatives, friends, and others who admired my dad attended. Just before the funeral began, Ken showed up.
Sorry. I'm late. I couldn't make it when your dad was critical.
His apology seemed half-hearted. Not sincere. I confronted him as he approached.
Why are you here? People who aren't related should leave.
What?
I'm your dad's son-in-law. Are you angry I'm late? Everyone's already here, don't get too emotional.
He tried to calm me down. But I stood my ground.
When I told you my dad was in critical condition and asked you to come to the hospital, you said you were on a trip and it was impossible, right? You yelled at me, saying you deserve the trip.
The funeral hall buzzed with my words.
Hey! Don't talk like that! I was on a work trip with colleagues. I couldn't just leave. It might have affected my work. A colleague so narrow-minded that they can't let you leave during a family emergency won't achieve much at work. Or were you really with your mistress? What? What are you talking about? Stop making baseless accusations. That's defamation. Sadly for you, I have evidence of your affair. What? I had hired a detective agency. There are lots of evidence photos in my bag. But for now, I'll show you the data saved on my phone.
I showed him the screen, and his face turned pale.
When did you?
Suddenly, my in-laws stepped in front of Ken, and my mother-in-law slapped him.
What are you doing? Betraying Julie and Mina and having an affair. You disgrace!
The in-laws scolded him while he stood there in shock. The funeral attendees looked at him coldly. My in-laws apologized to my mom and me. Then took Ken away. Afterward, I contacted a lawyer, demanded a divorce from Ken, and filed for alimony and child support. Ken ended up with a substantial debt. I reported everything to his workplace, and he lost his standing there. Now, he's been relegated to another department, treated coldly by his colleagues, and cut off by his in-laws. He lives a lonely life, mostly paying off his debts. Ken's mistress seemed to have treated their affair as just a fling, and she quickly disappeared from his life. Meanwhile, I moved back to my parents' house and now live there with my mom and daughter, Mina. When I discussed my situation with my company, they said the offer to become a full-time employee still stands. If I request it, they're willing to make the switch right away. This should make supporting my daughter no problem at all. I asked Mina how she felt about not seeing her father anymore, and she said it was okay since he was practically non-existent in her life anyway. Even if Ken wants to see Mina, I doubt she'd be interested in meeting him. I plan to continue pouring my love into Mina, spending happy and joyful days with my mom and daughter.
Take good care of those two, will you?
What do you mean, take good care? Although John said it casually, I wonder if he would have accepted it if nothing had happened. I still don't quite understand. John was supposed to have gone on a business trip, but apparently, he had an accident at his destination. The call I received led me to a small town. It was suspicious that business trips, which had never been frequent before, suddenly increased, and he started going several times a month. Moreover, an employee of a copier company having a traffic accident in a town must mean something's up. While thinking about all this at the hospital, I accidentally ran into Emily. Why is Emily here? And what does it mean that she was in the town with John? Even in this seemingly desperate situation, it's infuriating to think he believes he can still deceive everyone. Does he think I'm just going to let this slide? I have strong allies, so there's no way John can escape without consequences. He should wake up to reality and rethink his actions. My name is Ida Smith. I'm a 33-year-old preschool teacher. After graduating from a community college, I started working at a fairly large town's daycare center. The job as a preschool teacher is harder than I thought, but being around these always smiling kids somehow makes me feel refreshed. However, constantly dealing with children at work, I sometimes yearn for adult conversation. Surrounded by dozens of kids, with a few fellow teachers around, I remain an educator in front of the children. Busy with work and unable to match schedules with college friends, I hardly have time for a coffee break. I don't have time to make friends with similar interests. So I'm always an educator when interacting with anyone other than myself. As a teacher, I can't really have adult-to-adult conversations. At my workplace, I am strictly a teacher, nothing more. One day, I was asked to take over the data management at work. A teacher going on maternity leave had been handling it, and it fell to me, seemingly the most idle and timid. Honestly, managing the data is just more hassle, not something to be happy about. I wanted to go home early and work as little and as easily as possible, so this was nothing but an additional chore. Even a job like managing the printer, which I was not used to in my usual work. I really hated it. Ensuring the printer works smoothly, refilling ink, and managing paper stock. It's all so bothersome. However, I couldn't have imagined that a person who would dispel my gloomy feelings was about to appear. In the afternoon, the daycare's bell rang, and the data manager, which was now me, was called to the staff room. It was nap time for the kids, so after informing my paired teacher, I headed to the staff room. "Hello. I've come for the printer inspection." I think I reacted as if I had been electrocuted at that moment. For some reason, his appearance or voice, there was something indescribable about him. Yes. I'm in charge. I took over from the previous person, and now I'm responsible. Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you. I'm John Smith from the printer company." My first impression of John was pretty intriguing. It wasn't the kind of feeling you'd normally have for someone you meet through work. It felt strangely familiar, like I had met him somewhere before. "You probably won't remember. Do you sometimes stop by the store in front of the station in the morning?" That comment jogged my memory. "Oh. You were in the snacks section at the store, right?" I occasionally stop by the store near the station to grab lunch or a drink. The items I buy vary, but there's always this guy there at a certain time. Right at the entrance, standing near the prominently displayed new products shelf, carefully choosing which one to buy. That was him. "Actually, I've seen you at the store. Never thought I'd meet you here." That's my line. I was curious about the new snacks, but I also found myself wondering about the lady I saw there sometimes. Could something like this really happen? Usually busy with kids at work, I, a woman with virtually no encounters with men, remember feeling thrilled by his words. "Talking about work is one thing, but how about we exchange contact info?" "Of course." That was how I, on the day I met the printer company representative, ended up exchanging contacts with him. We gradually got closer, sharing little daily incidents and amusing stories, and he became more and more significant to me. It was love at first sight for me. But as I got to know Ida, I realized she's someone I want to be with all the time, someone who makes me feel so at ease. "Will you marry me? I can't believe this dreamlike day has come. I'm so happy." For me, who thought I'd just aged being focused on work, this was an unexpected spring. Meeting someone by chance on the streets, deepening our interaction and love, and moving towards marriage as a goal. At that moment, I was on top of the world, but I also had another thought in my heart. I won't end up like my sister. I will seize my happiness. I whispered that to myself. My sister, Emily, is 2 years older than me. Though we're not far apart in age, the idea that we're close as sisters is a complete misconception. I'm, well, not exactly a standout type. Just an average person who decided to become a preschool teacher because I loved kids, with decent grades and an okay sense of style. On the other hand, Emily was the total opposite, always focused on fashion. She was always thinking about how to stay beautiful and stylish. The kind of person who was part of the top, trend-setting, somewhat admired group in her school. Perhaps it's because of such relationships, but dating men has been a common occurrence since my student days. Ever since she got a boyfriend in her first year of middle school, Emily had never been without a boyfriend. She moved out of her parents' house right after high school graduation to live with her then boyfriend. In the end, she had a daughter at the age of 25 and settled down, but soon after, she got divorced. I sometimes checked if she's doing well by connecting with her on social media. She always dressed up stylishly and posted dazzling photos, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness. More like a fake facade from my childhood when I couldn't stand not being the center of attention, rather than a real mother. It's not about flaunting happiness in front of others. I believed that I should weave a happiness that fulfills myself and John. That was my belief. Life was blissful right after we got married. Coming home to someone I love, sharing meals, and enjoying the calm evenings together was something I cherished. We'd share our day's experiences and laugh together. Those moments were priceless to me. But at some point, things with John started to feel off. He began commenting on my appearance and behavior. He seemed like the type who wanted to control others, always offering unsolicited advice. At first, I tried not to mind it, but it was becoming too much.
Hey, Ida, don't you ever do your makeup properly? As a preschool teacher, it tends to come off while taking care of kids or playing with them, so not really. But isn't that outfit a bit too casual for work? Is it? I always dress like this, don't I?
That day, I was wearing a hoodie and jeans. Since I bike to the daycare, I prioritize comfort, and I change into work clothes there anyway. I've always commuted in this style without any issues.
Most working women in their 30s don't walk around in such casual clothes. It looks like loungewear. Really? I've always dressed like this. What's up all of a sudden?
John always had something to say about my clothes or belongings. From my bag and outfit to my hairstyle and makeup, he'd complain they weren't feminine enough or didn't fit a working adult. Once, when we went out for lunch near the station and stopped by a bookstore, he picked up a women's magazine and started this conversation.
Hey, Ida, why don't you dress like this?
It was a magazine targeted at ladies, adorned with flashy text and decorations. Win this summer with a dress, get ready for a date with a $300 outfit. Honestly, these were far from my interests and lifestyle.
Sorry, but I'm not really into this stuff. It doesn't suit me or my job. Oh, so you're not interested in matching my taste?
He turned moody after that. 6 months into our marriage, he started acting strangely and would get upset for no reason. I couldn't understand what John wanted or was thinking. Since then, our relationship has felt strained. We only have minimal conversation now, with no room for fun chats or light jokes. It's like there's a draft between us. Though we've never had a big fight or anything to apologize for. I can't figure out where things went wrong. If there had been some issue or argument in the past, I could trace back and try to resolve it, but honestly, I'm clueless. The only thing that comes to mind is when I turned down the outfit John wanted me to wear. Could that be the cause? Living together, sharing the same space and time, I thought we'd find some common ground for casual conversation. There was a TV special about infidelity airing at the time. The usual commentators and hosts were debating definitions of cheating and where the line is drawn. Of course, I'm totally against cheating. I've even broken up with past boyfriends because of their infidelity. In my view, cheating is absolutely off limits, especially in a marriage. Trying to lighten the mood, I casually brought it up to John.
Hey, this TV show is discussing infidelity. Yeah, well, love takes different forms for everyone, doesn't it? Love does come in different forms, sure.
Then, John started speaking rapidly, almost as if he was trying to convince me.
Think about it, right? Isn't it weird that a single piece of paper called marriage suddenly means you can't fall in love with anyone else for the rest of your life? I mean, what's up with that? A bit of free love should be okay.
Honestly, there was something unsettling about his words, not quite what you'd expect from a married man. It made me wonder if something had happened. Or if John was the type who wanted to continue romantic adventures even after marriage.
Besides, love isn't defined by marriage as a formality, but by the depth of feeling, right? No matter how married you are, if you don't truly love someone, it's meaningless.
Hearing this made me question what marriage meant to John, and it left me feeling uneasy. His words seemed directed at me, and I couldn't bring myself to look him in the eye. How could I have fallen for someone who can say such unbelievable things without batting an eye? I must have been out of my mind back then. Days passed, but I couldn't shake off what John had said. Knowing him, he wasn't the type to joke about such things, which only made me feel more perplexed and eager to find out the truth. I wondered if there was any way to investigate this. I flipped through work files. Then it hit me, maybe I could ask someone for confirmation. One day, John came home, avoiding my gaze, and said, "I have to go on a business trip tomorrow."
Another business trip? Weren't you gone for like 3 days last week?
Unfazed by my surprise, John replied nonchalantly,
"Can't help it, right? Someone quit unexpectedly at this busy time, and work isn't getting done. I'm like the go-to big brother there, I have to keep things running."
His sudden announcement made me ask,
"Hey, is the person who quit someone I know? The senior you talked about before?"
I used to have an idea of who he mentioned from work since John used to share office stories and funny incidents. My casual question was met with a hard look.
"What? Does it matter who it is? What's it got to do with you, Ida?" "No, it's just small talk, nothing more."
But John, clearly irked, cut the conversation short and went to the bathroom. Lately, his business trips seemed to be increasing. 3 years into our marriage, there hadn't been any significant talk of department changes or promotions. Nothing from John, at least. But the trips had become more frequent. From once a month to twice, then thrice. Now, he's often gone twice a week, and sometimes even the entire week. The next day, before leaving for work, John said to me,
"This trip is with an important client, so don't you dare contact me."
"What?" The seriousness of his request surprised me.
"Got it? If my phone rings during a crucial deal and I get distracted, it's on you. Can you handle the responsibility if a $200 million contract falls through?"
With those words, he left, and I watched his retreating figure, deep in thought. I got ready and headed to work. As usual, in my hoodie and jeans, riding my trusty old bike. I finished my duties at the daycare and was going to take a break. I noticed the TV in the break room was covering a traffic accident. While chatting with a colleague about the dangers of traffic accidents, my phone rang. I don't usually carry my phone at work, but I had it with me in the break room and noticed the call immediately. It was from an unknown number, and to my surprise, it was the police on the line. They were calling to inform me that John had been in a traffic accident. Just the other day, he seemed fine, but now in an accident? I couldn't believe it, but I composed myself to hear more. He was in critical condition from the accident and had been rushed to the hospital. He was still unconscious, and they wanted me to come right away. I hurriedly asked for the location of the accident and the hospital's name. But something struck me as odd when I heard the name of the police station. It was in a famous town for sightseeing. Why would John be on a business trip there? This thought crossed my mind. But regardless, I needed to rush to John's side. The story begins from there. After consulting with the daycare director, I left work early and took some time off to be with John. But before heading to him, there was something I needed to do first. I made a phone call. And soon, documents were sent to my house. At the hospital, John was lying in bed. He didn't wake up for 5 days, but finally regained consciousness. The doctor said he had a head-on collision with a truck, resulting in severe damage and partial paralysis.
"No way, John, you're kidding, right?" "Sorry, but please take care of the two of us."
I was lost in thought at his words. Take care of the two of us? What was he talking about? It didn't seem like a joke, so I asked.
Sorry, but who are the two people you're referring to?
John's expression briefly showed he had slipped up. Who else? It's me and Erica. Erica is Emily's daughter, my niece. I had met her a few times at my parents' house, but why bring her up now?
Why are you suddenly mentioning Erica?
Well,
I got a call from Erica during my trip. She asked me to take care of her if anything happened to her.
The fact that Erica would contact John directly, and not her mother, was puzzling. Why not ask Emily? I blurted out.
Wait, you have Erica's contact info? Well, it's more like I was in touch with Emily.
John and Emily were in contact? And what did he mean by take care of if something happened? His hesitant tone was particularly troubling. I was still trying to process all this when a nurse wheeled in another hospital bed. The fellow passenger in the same traffic accident, the nurse said as she wheeled in the bed. I couldn't help but cry out when I saw who was in that bed. It was unmistakably Emily. And her belly was noticeably large.
Emily? Why are you here? And that belly?
I was baffled by what the nurse said about them being co-passengers in the same accident. And the two people John was referring to earlier, could it be? So, let me get this straight. Because of the accident, you're asking me to take care of you and my sister, right?
Exactly. You catch on quick. It's great to have a woman who's sharp in situations like this.
I felt as if all the blood had drained from my body. This was too perfect to be a mere coincidence. It couldn't possibly be a coincidence. I was scared to ask, but I had to.
Don't tell me, John, you were on a supposed business trip here with my sister and got into this accident? Well, the trip was real, or rather not a lie. It just happened that Emily was here, and I thought I'd drop her off.
His stammering, desperate excuses were pathetic. I could somewhat sense that my voice was trembling. I could barely comprehend the situation I was in.
So, you coincidentally met my sister during a business trip and ended up sightseeing together?
I blurted out at John, overwhelmed by emotions. My emotions are a mess, torn between not wanting to hear any more and knowing this isn't an issue I can just ignore. Whether he knew about my feelings or not, John was speaking in a nonchalant tone. He probably still hasn't fully grasped the situation he's in. John was trying to figure out how to talk his way out of this. His eyes were busy, darting here and there.
You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's your bad habit to always think the worst, he retorted.
I seized the opportunity to confront him with the truth.
John, this was a fake business trip, wasn't it? A cover for your affair with my sister. Me? On a fake business trip? I'm a sought-after man. I don't have time for such things.
He seemed to think that yelling would make the problem go away.
So, you're saying you weren't on a fake trip? Even if you shout, I wonder if the boss would believe that?
John always put work first and valued his reputation above all. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that his work was solely driven by how much he was evaluated and praised by important people. Mentioning the company president's name made him flinch. When I mentioned the president's name, it seemed like he flinched for a moment.
What? The president? What does he have to do with this? If you're not doing anything shady, you should be able to explain everything to the president, if you can, that is.
John scoffed.
You don't understand how it works. A president doesn't get involved in every little employee's business trip. You're embarrassing yourself not knowing that.
Say whatever you want.
Oh, and I have a letter from that very president.
The moment he saw the envelope with the company's name, his expression changed from despair to joy.
Finally, my efforts have been recognized. Working from entry-level to regular employee for over 15 years, it all meant something, John said with a sense of accomplishment.
Really, a raise? I asked, almost bursting into laughter at his confident assumption.
Of course. My peers have been getting promotions, and I've been waiting for my turn for over a decade. But hard work pays off. Hurry, hand over the letter.
He genuinely seemed to believe the envelope contained a notice of his salary increase.
Here you go, take your time reading it.
I said as I handed him the envelope. He snatched it roughly and placed it on the hospital table. Holding the envelope, he looked at it intently, his face tense with anticipation. As he tore open the envelope, his excitement was evident. But upon unfolding the paper, his expression froze.
A termination notice. Why me?
The envelope was actually from John's company's president.
Look, there's more paperwork inside the envelope. You'll understand once you go through it. Shut up. Just shut up.
He snapped, flipping the envelope upside down and spilling out all its contents. The documents scattered on the table, some falling to the floor.
Receipt discrepancies for claimed expenses and inconsistencies in your travel routes. Do any of these ring a bell? No way, that can't be.
I had contacted the company's president right after the accident, asking him to check John's company phone GPS and expense receipts. The president was already suspicious of John's actions. He was proactive in his response, especially since it was an employee's wife who reached out. Thanks to the president's efforts, a mountain of irrefutable evidence against John was gathered in no time. No matter how much John tried, the fact that he had been misusing company funds on fake business trips was undeniable.
It seems the president has been watching you closely, John.
He's thorough, isn't he?
Shut up.
There's nothing you can do now. Your usual tricks and lies won't work.
How much did you know?
Everything.
I knew you were getting fired.
I had been informed by the president that John was scheduled for dismissal. However, considering his long service, they had offered him the option to resign voluntarily.
What am I supposed to do now? Oh right, Ida, you're a preschool teacher, so you're fine.
Fine? What do you mean?
I questioned his smug expression. You have qualifications, so you can work anywhere, anytime. I may have my certification, but I'll become a stay-at-home husband, managing the house, taking care of Emily and her child. Nowadays, with volunteers and helpers, we can manage childcare.
Meanwhile, you work.
Sounds like a good plan, right?
I was disgusted by John's rambling, his nostrils flaring with excitement. His selfish remarks were a mix of astonishment and anger, stirring indescribable emotions within me.
Who's going to lend you a hand? You and some volunteers,
he said, still believing someone would help him out, a mindset I couldn't comprehend. People say that life is about helping each other, but in this case, it's clear that all he's thinking about is receiving help unilaterally. Relying on someone isn't bad, but living a life where you only think about getting help and relying on others, what's that about?
I didn't work hard to earn my preschool teaching qualification just to support a cheating, dishonest man. I'm not working to live with someone like that.
I handed John the business card of the lawyer I had already hired.
We're getting a divorce. I'll be seeking alimony. Any further discussions will go through the lawyer. A divorce? Demanding alimony from a partially paralyzed person? Are you a demon? Do you even realize what you're doing?
I sighed in exasperation and said,
Do you realize what you've done? I could throw your words right back at you. Maybe if you reflect on your actions, you'll understand. Weren't you in love with me, and didn't we marry? What about the vows we took in sickness and in health? Were they all lies?
John grasped the hem of my shirt with his functioning hand, but I briskly shook it off. Looking down at Emily in the next bed, I said, Emily, you've always needed to be number one, haven't you? Even towards me, your younger sister. Emily's expression faltered for a moment but quickly returned to normal.
Of course. I couldn't stand the idea of plain Ida getting married before me. I was supposed to be the one to marry into wealth first.
Marry into wealth? I asked incredulously.
Yes. My first boyfriend right after high school was just into casinos and didn't work. Erica's father earned a meager salary, and we were still living in an apartment. I couldn't stand it anymore,
Emily said tearfully, but her words were utterly self-centered. You only think about what others can do for you.
I'm a woman. Looking beautiful is my job, right? I want to be a shining jewel beside my husband. And I thought John, despite not being very handsome, worked at a well-known company and had a good salary?
I asked, to which she glared at me.
You didn't divorce John quickly, so we had to sneak around and ended up in this accident.
As Emily glanced back and forth between John and me, I asked.
So you're saying it's my fault? Yes, what about it? The choice of a marriage partner was undoubtedly your own. Using someone's income as an excuse to meddle with another person's husband doesn't justify anything.
Realizing further conversation with these two would only exhaust me, I decided to leave. Lingering in the hospital room would only cause more disturbance. Their dialogue was like something out of a drama, unbelievable and overly dramatic. The extent of their unreasonable statements left me speechless.
I'll discuss the rest with Emily through the lawyer. For now, just know that I'm seeking a lump sum in alimony. Alimony? Against a partially paralyzed person?
Sorry, but you were on a cheating trip, weren't you?
You brought this on yourself.
Emily reacted strongly to my words of "you brought this on yourself." Mumbling to herself in denial, her face grew increasingly pale, and I couldn't help but feel amazed at how far she was willing to run from reality. Eventually, John and I divorced. With a strong lawyer specializing in divorce cases, I successfully obtained higher than average alimony from John. After resigning from his job, John was heard to be drifting from place to place. Emily, having tried to steal her own sister's husband, ended up being disowned by her family. She's been aimlessly wandering, with nowhere to go. She did receive assistance from a facility that supports people with disabilities, but all she did was complain, "This isn't the kind of work I should be doing, and I can't stand these trivial tasks." Her behavior was not only unproductive but also disruptive to others, leading to her being banned from the facility. Now, she's barely getting by on minimal disability insurance. As for Emily's child Erica, after contacting Erica's father, he gladly agreed to take her in. This was a relief, considering the custody battle during their divorce where Emily insisted that a mother should always be with her child, and the mediator granted her custody. I was somewhat worried about Erica, so it's truly a relief she's with her father, away from Emily's influence. I felt relieved because staying with Emily, Erica wouldn't have been truly happy. I continue to work at the daycare, living my usual life. As for the alimony, John's family ended up paying his part, and Emily is repaying hers through a loan. Although the settlement was more than I expected, the happy days of ignorance are gone and won't return. Now, all I can do is look forward and move on. There's no point in looking back since I can't return to those days. Perhaps quitting my job and traveling to unknown countries could be a good change. These are the thoughts I ponder as I go about